Not all, you know, people say all babies. To some extent. Yeah, but.
Well, let me call the meeting to order. Can those of you on the screen hear me? Good, thank you. I have one adjustment to the agenda that I'd like to make, which is, we've got with us a guest speaker, Lisa Varga, who's the Virginia Library Association Executive Director, and just now, today, appointed the new Associate Executive Director of the American Library Association's Public Policy and Advocacy Office. So welcome, Ms. Varga. We're happy to have you with you, but we want to move you down to the bottom of the agenda. And the reason for that is that we expect it to be a short agenda. And this will give us more time and for people to ask questions and to give proper justice to your message.
Thank you. You do what's best for you. I appreciate being here.
Good. So we'll move that position down just before the adjournment. And let me ask if there are any other corrections or additions to the agenda. If not, then the agenda is adopted. We'll turn to welcoming remarks, and maybe, Skip, you can do some introductions.
I'll do
please.
some introductions. Well, we've got a lot of folks here. Let me start with the people whose names I see on the virtual board up here. So we have several people from the Library Foundation: Noah Comet, Tessie Ballard, Vanessa Carter, Chris Maslanka. Looks like Faith and Simona from the trustees are here. Laura Kelman, I believe you're here representing the Staff Association. Welcome. Rachel Trianos Halbig, I think you're going to give some welcoming remarks in a moment. Carol Kaysen, Regional Manager. Let's see. John Wetzel is here. We've met John a few times visiting the board. And I think that's everybody that's not a trustee.
Okay,
Or on the executive team. So welcome, everyone.
Yeah, welcome to our guests. And let me ask Rachel Trayonas Halbig if she'd like to make a few remarks.
I got a couple names. I don't know where to move. I'll move over here. Hello, I'm Rachel Troyanos Halbig. I'm the branch manager of the Crofton Library. And on behalf of the library and all the staff, we're so happy that you're here. We were recently renovated. We reopened on December 30th. So please take a look out in the branch. I personally think it's gorgeous. This building opened 23 years ago, so it was very needed. We look amazing now. Check us out there. We're known for our plants, especially, so we're the planty branch. Be sure you check out all of the plants out there. In addition to the plants that we have in the branch, we also have a community garden right outside. In the community garden, we harvest the vegetables and give them out to the community in the lobby. We have 19 full-time staff here. We have approximately 14 part-time staff. We also have a farmer's market on Saturdays. So, just some fun information about the Crofton branch. And again, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Rachel?
We have questions.
What time is the farmer's market?
It's in the winter hours, it's 9 to 12, but in the summer, it's 8 to 1 on Saturdays.
Okay.
Well,
things do look beautiful.
Moment, I would like to say that I have been here many times with my children, and especially since it's now my home branch at the beautiful and large Odenton is temporarily closed down. So they'll be visiting you, and please forgive the harassment. They're tiny, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the last board meeting? Hearing none, then the minutes will be approved. And it's time for public comment. Are there any of our visitors wishing to make public comment? Okay. Well then, we're on to the consent agenda. Only one item there. And let me ask if there are any, if there's any desire to remove the purchasing policy from the consent agenda for discussion.
I did have a question about that, Chris, if we could take that off.
Okay, so we'll take that off and we'll bring it up on consideration of items after the reports. Reports from, well, I guess we start with mine. I spent a half hour, 40 minutes with Skip and Cedric and several others online with the county executive this morning. And I thought it was an extremely successful meeting. Skip did a very fine job presenting the needs of the library. And of course, we're in very tough fiscal times. So we had presented to the staff 19 items that needed to be funded through a supplemental budget. We narrowed those down to 4. 4 of the others had already been put into the budget by staff. And those included IT firewall replacements for the Odenton Library, security cameras, cybersecurity awareness training, and some of the costs for the attorney negotiating for the collective bargaining agreement. But the 4 critical areas: learning and development assistant manager, HR specialist in labor relations, maintenance mechanic 1, and performance measures and data analyst. These were added to the list, and I thought they were well received. I don't know whether we'll get any of these in the tight times that we have, but they've already added $287,000 to the budget in those 4 items that have been included by staff. And we'll see if we can get some of these others. Some of these items have been on our wish list for years, but there's always hope. So we'll hear more after after the county executive completes looking at all the departments and organizations that report to him, and then the county council will go forward. We did have a moment of levity. I don't know if you still have Chris Trumbauer's
His limerick,
limerick.
I have it ready to read.
Oh, yes.
I'll read it right now.
Yeah, Chris
So-
Trumbauer is the financial director.
He's the budget officer for the county. The 4 items that were added were recommended by his office, the budget department. At the county executive's cabinet meeting 2 or 3 weeks ago, Chris Trumbauer talked about how tight things are, and then he said he would end on this. There once was we had put in 19 supplemental budgets. There once was a department we know whose supplementals numbered more than 20. What were they thinking? Or what were they drinking? There's no gold at the end of this rainbow. We reviewed all your budgets with care. We had to trim some here and there. Blame the feds or the state. The situation's not great. This year we'll get less from their share. Now, before you turn into an angry mob, remember, budget is just doing our job. While we might be in a pickle, we try to stretch every nickel, and we really tried to find a way to fund your thingamabob. We'll be sharing our recommendations soon. From our cuts, no department was immune. We tried to be fair and use the data that was there to ensure that expenses don't balloon. In conclusion, I will say again, we're all part of a team that works for him, and he pointed to Mr. Pittman. We'll build the best budget and try not to fudge it, even during a cyber incident of external origin. There you have it.
Well, thank you. I hope you all saw Rudy's memo of an hour and a half ago or so on the quality of the community meeting for the Glen Burnie Library. I'm glad that it went as well as it did, Rudy. And thank you also for your report to the county executive today on the
Pittman say what percentage you're going to cut?
No, it's not a percentage cut. It probably will be overall an increase, but he's not cutting into our budget. It's a matter of he probably will not be able to fund very much of our supplemental budgets.
Yeah, so we've got a new a library in the making up in Millersville as part of the construction project of the YMCA. And you'll hear more about that from Skip and Rudy, but there was a nice presentation of that, and the county executive is very anxious to see that go forward. It'll save the county money over time, and it'll bring us a new library a couple of years earlier than planned. So if there are any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Ms. Gandhi to report for our treasurer. Kathy Belcher is not here.
Thank you for everything you do to sorry. I have no idea what my computer is doing.
I want to hear the British idea.
Sounded like a book.
So Ishani?
Yep. So you stole some of the thunder around the operating and supplemental funding requests, but a couple of points I want to highlight. So we completed the RFP process for the discoveries at the mall construction project, and so Kalmia Construction is the winner. The project is currently estimated to cost about $725K. So that will construction will sort of begin in the next few weeks on that. And then the other point, the Anne Arundel County Council had a working session earlier this week where they unanimously voted to approve recognizing our fund balance appropriation request for $400,000. And so these funds will cover the union attorney, which we've previously voted on, as well as sort of financing required for the discoveries of the mall expansion and some Maryland host service fees as well. So.
Okay, that sounds like that also was a report for the Finance and Audit Committee.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Other than, I could just speak to it right now, just with the financial statements for January 2025, there's no major sort of revenue or expenditure variances that we've noted, so everything's on track.
Okay, good, thank you. Liaisons to the Foundation Board, Mr. Comet or Mrs. Gandhi?
Still gonna be me.
Okay.
All right, so for the Foundation Board, as of February 28th, the Foundation has reached a 90% revenue goal of fundraising, so big kudos to Kathleen and her team. We've about $602K raised already, and we still got a quarter to go in the year, so. In terms of some campaigns I want to highlight, so the Always Ice Cream and Firm Brewery collaboration was another successful year. The ice cream flavor was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and we raised over $4,600 for that. So seems like a successful collaboration will continue on to next year. Key highlight, the Library Giving Week is almost here in a couple of weeks, April 1st to the 5th. There are we'd like to sort of do tables at library branches during that week. So you should have gotten an email from Bethany about the details, but please sign up. There's sort of hours throughout the day across different library branches. So I'll call that out. This is also the first year we're doing text to give. So keep that in mind. There's the text 50155. It's in the board executive, like in the document, but you can kind of text to give and make that easier. And then we've got Read Between the Lines, which we do every year on April 27th. And then Love for the Library, we're already sort of getting a head start on that, scheduled for September 9th, 2025.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions? Yeah, well, Kathleen has been working with a foundation board that sets some aggressive goals, and it's so good to see how you're exceeding them.
We have a good team and obviously very generous community supporters. And thank you to trustees and then also the foundation board members. So I'm good.
Thank you. Skip, your report and those of your officers.
So the only thing I really want to talk about is the Y Library project that came to us about a month or 6 weeks ago. The Y of Central Maryland approached the county about possibly receiving some funding to help with that project. And Christine Anderson, the Chief Administrative Officer, said, oh, you know what, we have a Millersville library that's in the capital plan for fiscal year 26 or 7 or 28. I wonder if we could maybe have a library with that Y. It turns out that the donor who gave the initial money to the Y had said, wouldn't it be great if we could have a library with this Y? So within the past 6 weeks, this has accelerated to the point where we had a tour of the president and CEO of the Y, his name's John Hoey, along with their chief financial officer, Sherry Rodman. We met at Revere Beach Library, went to Discoveries, went to Bush Annapolis, and they are totally fired up about how much commonality there is in the customer base and the purpose of the Y along with the library. It appears that the county will put this project into the capital plan. It'll save them a great deal of money overall and move the project up so that in this budget year, the county executive on May 1st will be announcing it to the public that we will have this project. It'll take about 2 years to build, so it may actually open before the Glen Burnie Library opens. Glen Burnie is moving along fast and furiously and it is on track to open in the year 2028. This one may open in the year 2027. So it's just a fantastic project. Oh, I should say it will be, the Y building is 60,000 square feet. The library will be 20,000 square feet. They are moving what was going to be their fitness room to a second level, and that's about 10,000 square feet of space where the library footprint will be right as you walk into the building, assuming the design stays roughly what it is now. And then it'll be a second level of the library at another 10,000 square feet. So total of 20,000 instead of 40,000, which is what the Millersville project was going to be. That 40,000 was going to include 10,000 square feet for the headquarters annex. So we do have one of our supplemental requests to get temporary space or basically rented, leased space for the headquarters staff to move into. That's not likely to be funded, but it's in there and we'll see how that works out over the next few years. Bottom line, new library on the way. That's it. I don't think any of the rest of my staff have anything to bring up. Yeah, okay, so that's our report.
Any questions for Skip?
So I guess the smaller library is maybe the one compromise we kind of had to make on.
Yeah, it won't be, the library part will not be 30,000 square feet as was planned. It'll be 20,000 square feet, but it's coming in quicker. It's, you know, it won't get bumped down the road. You know, in the past, as administrations have changed, school projects and other projects have been bumped down the road by a decade or more. So this will actually get done, and it'll be great. Oh, and we'll be putting together the request for staffing in the next, I think it'll be in the next fiscal year. So we won't have the staffing part in this year's budget. It'll be all capital, but then next year we'll figure out the staffing needs and move forward with that.
Is 20,000 square feet about the equivalent of Revere Beach?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, the biggest difference is it's stacked on one floor on top of another, and anybody who goes down to Calvert County to the Twin Beaches Library, you can see a library that is stacked 2 levels. So, oh, and the place, it'll be on Veterans Highway. If you think it's at West Benfield Road, so if you are going up Interstate 97, you take the Benfield exit, you turn right, the library is on the left. It's a place that has been a farm for many years, and it'll be a library now. I mean, a Y and a library.
Hopefully it'll have a pool.
It'll have a pool, yeah, so you can, yeah.
Need a pool.
Yeah.
Any further questions for Skip? Okay, then we have,
We have some new people here too.
now anyone online who have questions for Skip?
I will just mention a few new people joined. So from the foundation board, Karen Smith and Betsy Bender have also joined us, as well as two of our branch managers, Michelle Noble and Rachel Myers. So,
Yes, thank you.
and yes.
All right, so we've removed from the consent agenda a motion to approve the purchasing policy. That motion is coming from the Finance Committee, and it doesn't require a second. So we have the motion on the floor, and Mr. Lemke had a question.
I was just trying to remind myself where this came from. So if memory serves, we had a discussion last year surrounding when we were hiring the attorney for the collective bargaining, right? And it came up because she was not the lowest bidder. So I'm seeing the language in red here, which kind of clarifies that you're no longer obligated to take the lowest bid. You just have to come to us, explain why.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm trying to clarify then, is there a board role then beyond that, like in terms of these contracts, like do we normally vote on these types of contracts?
Normally you would not vote, and this just puts the responsibility in the position of the CEO to make that recommendation and explain it. But that would be a time where the board could raise concerns and, frankly, could stop it in its tracks if the board wanted to. But it's more of a, here's what we want to do, this is why, and then have discussion. And frankly, if the board had concerns at that point, in my case and any future CEO, I think you would had concerns, you would probably kind of back away from it and reconsider and obviously take into account what the board is saying. But it puts the responsibility with the CEO.
Okay, so that makes sense. I guess my one sort of concern was, if you're providing a justification for going with a higher bid, the board finds that rationale to be unsatisfactory in some way, we have some ability to.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, if the amount in question is over $100,000, that comes to the board anyways. So it just raises the ceiling on the amount that's in the discretion of the CEO.
And I'll just say it, but there's also the fact that the board hires and potentially fires the CEO, so there's always that.
You mean now?
We're not gonna go there.
Everything that's that bad.
In other words, this position and I work for all of you.
So is there any further comment or question with respect to that motion? Then, all in favor of approving the motion to approve the purchasing power?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Well, we are through with the general agenda, so we've got some.
Actually, Mr. Chair, we haven't done a finance, can you give the entirety of our governance?
I'm sorry, we didn't get it right. Thank you. We have a report from Jim Lemke for the Governance Committee.
I'll be Jim Eastep today, but
We're so in sync.
That's exactly the same. There are only two major items. It had been brought to my attention that the position of second vice chair had existed because of a unique set of circumstances that no longer are here. So we had the proper procedures and the proper vote to eliminate that position when the next term for leadership begins. So there'll be no more second vice chair. And I'm sure Rudy will follow whatever he needs to do to rewrite our bylaws so that it appears as such. Does that need to be voted on by the board, or was that a?
Yes.
Okay, so that is something that we'll be bringing forward as a motion. A second matter we're bringing as a motion is a new first vice chair when the new term begins. And that would be my colleague on my right, Ms. Lonnie Summers. And our committee voted unanimously to advance her to this board in that position when the term changes. So those two motions are elimination of the second vice chair position and the elevation of Ms. Summers to first vice chair when the new term begins.
And that's the motion for today?
Today.
Yes. Is there, well, I guess it comes from the committee, so it doesn't require a second. Their discussion.
Point of, I guess this is just a question. Lonnie's advancement into that position, I'm assuming would come at the same time that Demita would become.
That's right, when the new term begins.
That's right.
And so the idea is that would be placed before the board today for a vote in May?
No, before the board be voted upon, so that when the new term changes, they would take effect as
Okay.
opposed to
Yeah, that's right.
being
So there's-
voted later.
Okay.
It'll take effect
Got it.
after the close of our fiscal year in June.
As long as the word term is used, Donna, we're good. When the new term begins,
Okay.
that will take effect.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the joint motion? Any-
Good job.
Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Lonnie, for agreeing to serve as vice chair of the board.
My pleasure, Mr. Chair.
We haven't yet approved the chair of the board. That comes in the next board meeting?
Is that how you're looking to do that?
That is at the chair's discretion. If he wants to get that off the plate now, then I have no.
Why not?
Yeah. Before she escapes us. Let's capture her.
Again, with the term next term applied, it should be fine.
Yeah, once again, this is a motion then coming from committee that doesn't require a second, and it's to advance Demita from vice chair's position to chair of the board after the fiscal year, at the beginning of the next fiscal year, July 1st. All in favor? Any opposed?
She needed to vote for herself. Did you?
Thank you, Demita, and we're looking forward to your meeting. Human Resources and Diversity Committee.
We did not meet this past month because we didn't have anything to discuss.
Well, that's a good short report.
Yes. Many report ever.
And any questions of Sandy? Okay, now we are able to move forward with our special guest speaker, Lisa Varga.
And Lisa, before you get started, I'm gonna point out that the president of the foundation board, Linda Green, is now with us, and I believe that's Stephanie Petruso, our digital experience manager, who's with us as well. So welcome everybody who's online, and welcome to our new Associate Executive Director of the American Library Association, Lisa Varga.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Demita, for recommending this. I just want to clarify, does your meeting stop at 5 o'clock?
5:30.
5:30, okay, so I do have some time then. Can everyone see my screen, just a giant slide and not my notes for the next slide, my cheater screen? You can all just see what, okay. I recognize that this is probably a far distance from some of you that are sitting in the room and may not be able to see. I will send these slides as a PDF to Skip so that he can share them with you after the meeting. I also just want to say I am the immediate past chair of the Virginia Beach Public Library Board, and it's nice to see that other library boards also laugh as much as we do when we have our meeting. So this session, when Skip asked me to do it last week, was really about intellectual freedom issues and guarding against censorship, but we're seeing a whole new different level these days. I think we weren't surprised, but it was still shocking when last Friday, late in the day, we got this warning, or I guess I say this executive order that came out last Friday. It gave the Institute of Museum and Library Services 7 days to submit a report to the Office of Management and Budget, which is known as OMB. I'm going to try my best not to over acronym and spell out my acronyms. So if I say something and I don't immediately say what the acronym means, one of you is allowed to yell acronym police and I owe you $1. So the deadline for this report is actually due tomorrow. But since this came out, the acting director of IMLS, Institute of Museum and Library Services, Cindy Landrum is no longer listed on the website, and we got news late yesterday that made it to Politico today that a gentleman who was sworn in as Deputy Labor Secretary last week has now been named Acting Director of IMLS. There was an article in Politico today. 2 employees said that Sonderling was headed to IMLS this morning to ensure it complies with an executive order shrinking the agency down to its statutory minimum. And there are a lot of questions about what statutory and statulatory mean. Statutorily, there's all kinds of manipulations of this word. And I think that if we've learned anything in the last few years, it's that when we think words mean something, other people think they mean something else. And so there are a lot of attorneys that are now wading through this. I received a text while you are all meeting that I just want to give you an update on, with the caveat that this is sensitive info and it seems to change every minute. The IMLS staff remain at work. They are, quote, not yet on an admin leave. Doge was on site today. Soderberg was sworn in as acting director, and several AGs, I believe that means attorneys general, are looking at a lawsuit. The case is that the cut goes too far into the statutory requirements of the funding. So I know that Skip was sharing some information with you all about how IMLS funding is something like 0.004% of the overall budget. And there are ways that you can take action to reach out to your members of Congress. Before you reach out to your governor, as some organizations have suggested, you might want to think about that. I don't know where your budget stands right now. We are not in a position here in Virginia to encourage our governor to fight back against the federal government for funding for libraries. Just something we can probably talk more about if questions come up. So these Institute of Museum and Library Services put out a note today about Sonderling swearing in. The quote here, and I know it's really small, so I'll read it. It's an honor to be appointed by President Trump to lead this important organization in its mission to advance, support, and empower America's museums and libraries, which stand as cornerstones of learning and culture in our society. I am committed to steering this organization in lockstep with this administration to enhance efficiency and foster innovation. We will revitalize IMLS and restore focus on patriotism, ensuring we preserve our country's core values, promote American exceptionalism, and cultivate love of country in future generations.
Wow.
There's a lot of words to think about there. So we can maybe chat about those. I'm not sure that, in my opinion, IMLS needs to be revitalized. I have questions about whether or not calling it inefficient is accurate when we know that the dollars provided to libraries from IMLS, we've got to show that those dollars generate way more, like the return on investment is so much higher than just receiving $1, right? This also became very popular on Reddit today. There is a Reddit thread called Fed News, and this has been updated repeatedly. First it was, Doge is at the Institute. Doge is asking the employees to leave. Then Doge saw that there were news crews there and decided, no, we don't want that picture online. So the staff were asked to stay, and it's been changing every minute today. So I wish I had something really positive to report. It's just that we're all learning every minute here. And this is the part where we jump into the actual presentation that I had done back at the Citizens for Maryland Libraries, just to give folks a picture of Virginia. We have 94 public library systems that are a combination of individual libraries, county, city, and regional systems. But I want you to keep in mind that I am a Jersey girl who lives in Virginia, so that might become a little more evident as we go on. Also, you all mentioning Millersville threw me right back to college. My first college roommate was from Millersville. Small world. Some of you may be familiar with some numbers that were put out by the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom about the numbers of unique titles that were targeted for censorship and the numbers of attempts to censor library materials and services around the country. These numbers actually dropped a little in 2024. over what we saw in 2023. But I would surmise that that isn't actually that the numbers dropped, it's that people were more afraid to report. We saw a lot of campaigns of fear, threats to librarian jobs, threats to librarian safety, and people were afraid to submit reports of censorship because they were worried that it would, even if they were doing it on their own time and on their own email accounts, that perhaps it could be tracked back to them. What we're also encountering is some soft censorship or silent censorship in which librarians who have been forced to live under this culture of fear have been removing books from shelves without them being challenged, just because those librarians have heard that people oppose those books and they don't want to ruffle any feathers. That's very dangerous as well, because you are removing information from people and violating their First Amendment rights. We do also understand that when you're fearing for your life, fearing for your job, there are some things that librarians do, and we just want to be able to talk about it and make sure that we're not hiding or locking materials to keep people from viewing them. So I know this feels like the last couple of years have been absolutely chaotic with censorship and book bans and requests for removals. Virginia has been facing this since 2013. We had a parent in Fairfax County that reported that her son, who was in AP English 12, had night terrors after reading Beloved in his class. She felt it was important that parents be notified that their children are, first she wanted the book removed, then she just said, okay, maybe we'll just go with parental notification. So in 2016,
I can't talk right.
In 2016, our governor vetoed legislation that Laura Murphy, this parent, attempted via the Virginia Department of Education and also just regular putting in some bills. At that same time, a delegate from Chesterfield County in our area raised concerns about the summer reading lists that were going around. 2017, there was another bill that landed on our Governor McAuliffe's desk, and he vetoed it. Governor McAuliffe, you want to remember that name, it's going to come up in a little bit. In about 2021 and 2022, school boards started to hear opposition to all kinds of things. CRT, that critical race theory that we know is not happening in schools. Masking, people had opposition to educators, and then were coming after nurses. In 2021, there's this Terry McAuliffe quote. He was in the middle of a gubernatorial debate with Glenn Youngkin, who was a candidate, fumbled his words and said, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach." Now, The Hill reported those 10 words, deserving of a top listing in the Hall of Fame of political blunders, may prove the turning point in a race where McAuliffe was expected to cruise to victory. Well, Terry McAuliffe did not cruise to victory. And the very next day after this debate on Twitter, Laura Murphy, that parent from 2013, was featured in a video, and her quote was, "As a mother, it's tough to catch everything. So when my son showed me his reading assignment, my heart sunk. It was some of the most explicit material you can imagine." As a result of this, Youngkin won, this is one of the reasons, and on his day one agenda said that he was going to support something called Senate Bill 656. The title of this was Sexually Explicit Content. The Department of Education shall develop model policies for parental notification. So this was actually about instructional material. It had nothing to do with libraries. But of course, when the bill was being debated, librarians asked, okay, you're saying this is about instructional material, but what if a teacher sends a student to the library to pick out a book for a book report? Is that then instructional material? And we were told that's not going to happen. That's not a big deal. But then I think you can all guess, as library people, what happened next, right? Books start disappearing from libraries. We get people generating controversy and chaos over a certain list of books that has been circulating around the country and online. So in April of 2022, while this bill is being implemented in schools, primaries began in Virginia for the Virginia 02 congressional seat. People started disrupting school board meetings, reading some passages out of context, and shutting down school board meetings. A member of our community here in Virginia Beach posted on Facebook that he and his colleagues had created a major win against pornography in schools, and they were going to celebrate one night or that night in Virginia Beach at a local restaurant, and everyone should come down and celebrate this removal of pornography from schools. And I saw this, I was sitting at my desk just like I'm sitting right here, and I thought, I'm probably not the target audience for that gathering, but I got in my car and went anyway. And I sat in the back and I listened to some of the most horrific public discussion of people's lived experiences that I could ever imagine. And what these folks had done was filed a temporary restraining order against the authors, publishers, and distributors of A Court of Mist and Fury and Genderqueer. These two books, I'm sure you all have heard those names come up before. This temporary injunction was citing a really small piece of Virginia legislation that it turns out was not legal to begin with. But those folks didn't care about that. All they wanted were the clicks and the attention. What was troubling at this meeting was that this attorney was talking about how they've gotten this major win over books when they hadn't really done anything. And a gentleman raised his hand and said, well, now that we've gotten these books out of the school libraries, how do we get them out of the public library? And the person who asked that question was a sitting city councilman.
Oh, boy.
So all politics is local, right? Like, it's a small town, a lot of people, I mean, Virginia Beach is a big city, small town. So from the parking lot of that restaurant, I activated my network. I contacted the Office for Intellectual Freedom at the American Library Association. I contacted, everybody I could think of. I wrote to all our library directors in the state and I said, they're coming for us. You need to check your collection development policies and make sure those are tight, that you have a reconsideration policy that protects the First Amendment. And I wrote to the library director here to say, we've got someone on city council who honestly believes there's porn in the library. We have to get to them to explain that we don't, and what obscenity law is, and all of those like legal things that people say porn in the library or obscenity, and we come back with our legal definition and jargon and the 3 prongs of the Miller test and all of these other Supreme Court cases, and we lose them a little bit. So we have to find other ways to get at their attention. I want to point out that this is a page that one of our school board members posted on her various Facebook groups. She had her friend submit this reconsideration form to the City of Virginia Beach schools. But what she didn't show was the last page of this, where her friend wrote, and I'm paraphrasing right now, there are much better coming of age novels that should replace this book, which is The Haters by Jesse Andrews. The person who submitted this said, there are so many better books, such as those written by Judy Blume. And if I'm hearing a laugh in the room, it's because you know that Judy Blume is one of the most banned and censored authors in the country, and I mean, for decades, right? And so if you don't know that you're recommending a censored author while you're trying to censor someone else, I don't think your argument holds much weight, but I'm not the boss of the world yet. So we had a hearing here in the city of Virginia Beach because of these lawsuits. And if you want to read the paperwork involved with it, I've thrown this QR code up on the screen. But basically, the judge heard it and said, it is hereby ordered that the order to show cause entered on May 18th, 2022 is vacated, meaning these people lost their lawsuit. Truthfully, I don't think they cared that they lost their lawsuit because they got what they wanted, which was media attention. We had a lot of partners in this. Let's see, I'm just going to rattle off some people that came together for this coalition. Local bookstores, the American Booksellers for Free Expression, the Association of American Publishers, Authors Guild, American Library Association, Virginia Library Association, Freedom to Read Foundation, Media Coalition, Robert Corn Revere, who is now with an organization called FIRE. I have to admit, I don't know up FIRE off the top of my head what that acronym means, but I do have a membership card in my drawer, which I think helps. So I want to point out, and I know this is kind of small font. This is the number 4 here. The book is available for distribution to minors in Hampton Roads. And I want to say this was written by an attorney in Hampton Roads at Barnes and Noble. They can't even spell the name of the place they're suing correctly. It's Barnes and Noble, folks. So like, that's the sort of thing where if I were a judge, I would throw the whole thing out. If you don't know the name of the store that you're mad at, fine. So by the time we got to this case, I was spending most of my nights on the phone with crying librarians. My phone number had made its way around to the schools, specifically in Virginia Beach, and people were sad and terrified and just needed someone to listen to them. And I started to get really mad about all the extra time and emotional burden that this was placing on people. And I thought about the value of library professionals' time. I'd also noticed a pattern with the people who were speaking at the school board meetings. They all started the same way. My name is blank and I am a taxpayer. And they would go on this rant against books. And here's the thing, I'm a taxpayer and I support librarians and I support our professionals. So I showed up at our next school board meeting with an invoice that I presented to the school board member who created all of this chaos and told her that she was wasting my time, she was wasting taxpayer time, and she owed me $400,000 of my taxes back. And she wasn't at the meeting. Her attendance was a whole other issue. So in the intervening 2 weeks between that school board meeting and the next one, she started posting on Facebook that she had found 100 more books, of course, because she found it on a Moms for Liberty site. And she was going to file a reconsideration a day for 100 days to prove how many terrible books were in the library. So I started to think about all of the people that get involved every time a reconsideration is filed. You've got the, the poor admin that has to create all the doodle poll meetings to find the right time for everyone to meet. You've got the superintendents, the librarians, the educators, the assistant principals, like all those people. Imagine what their hourly wage is for this craziness. And so I went back 2 weeks later with an invoice for $7 million. And I said to her, I'm not even going to give this to you. I'm going to go to city council and I'm going to ask them to raise the budget of the schools by $7 million this year. And I want them to name that tax after you. So when everyone gets their tax bills, they'll know that you're the reason why we're playing this game. I think that sometimes money is the only way to get at these folks. And so what was really interesting was that this got a lot of attention because it was sort of a different tactic. At the same time, people were coming up to me and say, or us in general, library professionals, like, what can we do to help? And so we created this little card that allowed people to scan the QR code, enter their information, and then anytime we needed to reach out to folks based on a particular zip code, we would be able to use that information. Maryland has this as well. Josh Stone has this capability. And so I don't know if he's created a little card for you all yet, but he and I have talked about it. So prior to a few years ago, reasonable challenges were someone objected to a book and came to the librarian and had civil discourse with a library professional and said, I disagree with this book, I would like it off the shelf, and the librarian would be able to have a conversation with them, and usually a resolution would be created. What ended up happening is that people created unreasonable challenges. And when I say unreasonable, I'm thinking of this woman at our school board who had her friends, excuse me, sorry about that, had her friends submit 16 reconsiderations over the course of a couple of weeks. At that point, I thought that was a pretty big deal. Because what we can do with unreasonable challenges is pace them out a little bit. They get a little frustrating. But honestly, we have a secret weapon as librarians, and that is called the reference interview. So when someone comes to us and asks and says, I disagree with this book, we have a set of skills to say, well, what do you disagree with about this book? Can you show me the page that bothers you? Can you talk to me about why the content is troublesome? Is there something else that we can help you find? That reference interview that we are trained on to help people get at the actual part of the argument is very helpful with civil discourse and reasonable challenges. When we get into unreasonable challenges and you try to reference interview someone by continuing to ask them more questions to dig deeper, their argument generally falls apart. And it's been my experience in the last few years, the more I dig in and ask people questions, the more they try to pivot the argument and ask that I am okay with having biological men compete in women's sports. They totally pivot. It has nothing to do with the books. So let's talk a little bit about unreasonable challenges. And I want to bring up Samuel's Library in Front Royal, Virginia. Please raise your hand if you've heard of this one. Anyone? Anyone? Okay, yep. Skip, is that you? This made its way to John Oliver's Last Week Tonight a couple of months ago. There were a group of people in Front Royal, Virginia that decided that they didn't like a lot of the books that were in the library. And so they had, and I wish I was kidding, a beer, babysitting, and book reconsideration party. So someone's house was open on a Saturday and you could go and bring your children and have them be babysat while you were given beer and reconsideration forms. We don't know if they actually had the books there. I think probably not. Probably not all of them. And on Monday morning, that group dropped 500 reconsideration forms on the desk of the library director. I'm going to let you all take a deep breath on that for a second. 500 of them. Imagine if someone dropped 500 pieces of paper on your library director's desk and said, deal with this. It takes a lot of time to go through all those forms, right? It took hours for them just to determine that there were 134 forms that were 134 books that they were complaining about. Well, a group of people called Save Samuels, who were residents of the county, said, we don't want this happening to our library. We disagree with what has been done. And what these folks who submitted the reconsideration request didn't realize was that those requests were covered by the Freedom of Information Act. And so the Save Samuels group did a FOIA request for all of the complaints against the books and then published a list here of the people who submitted reconsiderations, and then also made these little cards explaining what it was that people objected to in the books as a means of fighting back. And I just want to show you some of the books these folks objected to. This is one called The Family Book by Todd Parr. Objection to this is the page on the left. Some families have 2 moms or 2 dads. This is sexually explicit, according to these folks, because it implies that those parents have sex. Anyone who's read Todd Parr's The Family Book knows there's no sex in the book. We also have Bathe the Cat, which is a really funny read aloud book about cleaning up in time for grandma's visit. Same thing, this is tagged as sexually explicit because of the final page where the 2 men are holding hands. And so when you reference interview these folks and you say, okay, so we are supposed to go through our entire collection now and remove all of the books in which people are holding hands, whether they are related or not. Like, so siblings, no hand holding. Grandma and granddaughter, no hand holding. Is that correct? They'll say, no, but we have an issue with nudity. Okay. So No David is a picture book in which David runs away from his mom and his little naked butt is on the page, his little naked cartoon butt. Is this nudity? Oh, don't be silly. We're not talking about things like that, but you should put underwear on David. So there's actually a sticker set, I understand, that is a perfect match for David's little butt that people have been encouraged to go into the stores and put that sticker on him and In the Night Kitchen by Maurice Sendak. So these folks who then have their no nudity in books, specifically in Virginia, I always like to pull this one out because this is our Virginia flag. Yeah, okay, so you can see it. You know what I'm talking about. And that's when I'm usually told, well, that's ridiculous. That's a flag. Well, we also have people who object to Grandpa's Camper, which is a book that on the front cover, there's a flag that is rainbow colored. So if that's offensive, but the Virginia flag is okay and we've got that in every classroom, the arguments don't always connect, right? And so we are working really hard to make sure that people who have ideas like this and are being prejudiced against folks, that their ideas don't advance. And so in Virginia this year, in addition to fighting some bad bills, what we were able to do was get a senator and a delegate to put forth a JLARC study. Now, this is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission. And what they have been tasked with doing right now is studying the removal of books from public schools, libraries in the Commonwealth between July 1st, 2020, and about now, I think through August 21, 25. They are going to go to each of the school districts and ask which books have you taken off and why, from library shelves, from instructional lists, that sort of thing. So it is our goal to be able to prove that there has been censorship and First Amendment violations in Virginia with this JLARC study. This idea was created by our legislative lobbyist liaison, who has worked for us for about 40 years. His mom was a librarian, like most wonderful people. And he is fully committed, although his task at the General Assembly is to just increase and preserve state aid for libraries. He's been really active and creative in understanding how we can use some of the work that the General Assembly does to our advantage. So one of the great things about the JLARC study is that it passed the Senate, it passed the House. It did not have to go to the governor for a final vote. So we didn't have to risk being vetoed because we have been vetoed in the past. We killed 3 bills this year. One of them, these are 2 House bills. One was to create a catalog of print or digital materials involved in school, available in school libraries, which was crazy because they already all have that. But this specifically asked for maintaining it in an electronic spreadsheet and updating it frequently. So I'd like all the library folk in the room who recognize how hard it is to update a catalog, much less a spreadsheet, to recognize like why we would have been against that. So we killed that one. The other one that we killed was model policies for review of print, etc. And this was really, this guy has an axe to grind on us because we killed another one of his bills last year. And this was basically that he's really worried about graphic novels. He wanted to make sure that no graphic novels had, I think he thinks that graphic novels means there's graphic sex in each of the books.
Probably.
But I can't be sure. So I'll just say, side note, I wish I had the skill set to create a supercut of like legislators who are trying to legislate against things and then can't pronounce the sex acts they're trying to legislate against, because this guy would be a winner. His performance last year at the General Assembly was chef's kiss without being able to pronounce words. The other one that we killed, this was actually really fascinating. So this is Senate Bill 931, Obscene Materials, Restrictions on Purchase, Distribution, Exhibition, or Loan, Exceptions, Libraries, and Schools. This would have created basically 18 and up rooms in public libraries. And our legislative lobbyist, Phil, went to Chris Head, the senator, and said, hey, just want to let you know when this is heard in subcommittee, we're going to be opposing it because we object to what this would do. And Chris Head went, it does what? He didn't know really what his bill was going to do. And so he chose to strike his own bill before it was heard by committee, which was really fascinating because the majority of that committee would have killed the bill anyway. So for him to strike it and not let them do it and then be able to blame a certain political party for it was really kind of fascinating. We hadn't seen anything like that before. So I mentioned flags briefly. People are objecting to all kinds of things lately: digital collections, decorations associated with displays, programming and events, fabric choices. We have a library that for the last 8 years has had curtains in its children's room, but now suddenly those curtains are politically motivated, according to some people. Anyone want to guess what color those curtains are? Rainbow curtains, yep, sheer panels. So it all feels pretty exhausting, right? But the good thing is that there are tons of people out there that are doing the work to try to save people time and energy. All of these places have a toolkit for you to use their graphics on your own social media or your website if you're interested in that. A lot of folks really pull this religion card that they're doing all of this in the name of religion. For those folks, I would recommend visiting the Interfaith Alliance. Their Keep Your Bans Off Our Books section is really fantastic. Book resumes on the Unite Against Book Ban website is something that was started by 2 librarians here in Virginia. And the idea was that as these librarians were getting these challenges, they were having to put together reports for their principals or their directors that showed all the awards a book had received or their positive reviews. And so a bunch of vetted librarians went through and created these resumes for each book so that when you get challenged, you just go and print that out and you have it ready to go so that it saves you time. I'm going to throw one thing else at you that has been kind of interesting. There's so much, oh, sorry. Is there some background noise? Okay.
There we go.
There's this AI revolution going on, right? And there's so much legalese with these court cases that are happening. So I heard about Notebook LM, and I uploaded all of these court cases that we've been a part of or have interacted with, Llano County, Texas, Crawford County, Arkansas. You load up the PDFs, and Notebook LM, which is a Google product, will convert those PDFs into an AI-generated podcast that explains all the legalese. It's really wild. It's really weird. Don't know if I trust it, but I will say this. Librarians like to wordsmith just about everything. If you've ever had to write a statement with librarians, you know that we like to have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. It's really interesting to listen to this and know that it wasn't wordsmith and how accurate it is. So when I send this out, you all will be able to scan that and listen to some of those podcasts. In Pittsburgh, the Pine Richland School District in April 2024, I'm just going to throw this out here because it was an incredible quote. We're winning a lot of these court cases. We got dragged into this political fight. And so I'll just say this, the judges who found favor in favor of books and in favor of libraries in Texas and Arkansas, those judges were appointed by Republican leadership. The reasonable people do understand the First Amendment and the implications of circumventing it. Some of their comments and their judgments in the summaries are really scathing, and I have to say very satisfying. So this quote is from the Pittsburgh School District: because library books are optional for students, the stance I've taken is that every book in the library should be suitable for some students, but no book in the library has to be educationally suitable for every student, pointing out differences in age and maturity between an incoming freshman and a graduating senior. The arguments that we hear repeatedly is that librarians censor things all the time when they make a decision not to purchase something. Well, that's not true. We purchase things based on criteria and collection development. We're not censoring, we're making good decisions based on the budgets that we have and the needs of our community. The other thing is people believe books should have rating systems, and that could be its own presentation. I'm happy to provide some background information about why they don't. And people say books are pornographic and harmful to minors. Also false. There is no, none of the books that are in a library are considered pornographic. And the reason we know that is because librarians are trained and educated on how not to purchase books that violate any laws. The reality is that librarians have core values, and we have 5 of them, right? Access, equity, intellectual freedom and privacy, public good, and sustainability. Those 5 things guide every library and everything that we do. We also have a really strong belief in the First Amendment and the Library Bill of Rights. In 1939, a group of really forward-thinking librarians got together and wrote the Library Bill of Rights. You can think about what was happening in 1939 to know why this was important to them. Also, people have this impression that students don't have First Amendment rights, and that's not accurate either. I have a little note here that just says trained professionals. We're trained professionals. And people don't get to question that. If they're not in the arena with us, do I have any Brene Brown fans, right? She's always quoting that in the arena. I'm going to jump over this because I know we're running low on time. I want to mention that in September, a group of people came together for something called an Intellectual Freedom Summit, the first of its kind since McCarthyism. An illustrator from a company called Lizard Brain was there to capture the experience, and this is a moment from author Nicole Hannah-Jones that should not take courage to be a librarian, but this is where we are. I want to mention Reversing Vandalism from San Francisco Public Library. This happened back in the early 2000s. Someone took a razor to books at San Francisco Public. Anything with the word gay in it, even those written by Gay Talese or about the Enola Gay. Yeah. Yeah, and there was something recently too, like the Enola Gay was taken off a website because it was considered diversity. Like, yeah. So what happened in 2001, the San Francisco Public Library staff started finding all these books all chopped up. And what they did, because the books were useless, they handed the books over to local artists who created artwork from these shredded pages. And this one in particular in the center circle says, "What were you afraid we would learn?" And it feels very relevant today. So back when I did this presentation for Citizens for Maryland Libraries, we talked about this idea of the wheel of democracy and all these things that were an attempt to be broken: elections, education, courts, news, health and science, libraries. And that was when I got to put up the weather and FEMA, because we had just seen the horrific destruction happening across the southern United States, including parts of Western Virginia and North Carolina, and people were trying to make people question their faith and trust in the weather systems. So my final note for that was just vote. Please when you vote, vote down every ballot. Make sure you vote in all those elections, and including school elections. I'll include this in the slideshow. Back in 1985, at the Parents Music Resource Council congressional hearings, both John Denver and Frank Zappa. And does anyone know who the third person was that spoke out back then? Dee Snider from Twisted Sister. If you go back and watch their speeches from then, again, incredibly relevant now. I want to make it clear that I asked this, who will tell your story? We are smarter, we are stronger, we know what we do every day. We know the purpose of our libraries and the support we give to our communities. We're not going to let these people who oppose us be the ones who have the final voice in telling our story. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't help but think that this will have generated some questions or concerns, questions of you, but perhaps also of Skip and Kathy in our own library system. So please, if there's anyone who'd like to speak.
Skip, have we had that many people requesting removing books from shelves?
Well, I mean, Rudy's the best person to answer that, but the bottom line is we have it every year. We have some, we've had the shadow banning. People came, I think they came to this library and checked out everything on the Pride display we had up in June. So I don't know, Rudy, anything to add?
It's been fairly normal, I would say. Nothing over the past few years. We haven't seen a spike here. I do appreciate Lisa underscoring, though, one of the processes that we take. When we do a book reconsideration, we put the reference interview at the very beginning. So the reconsideration form is not available online. You must come to see a librarian and speak to the librarian directly. So that's the reference interview. And during that, and you also have to have a library card. So you have to have some skin in the game. You have to be one of our members put in a reconsideration. Once you go through the reference interview with the librarian, only then are you provided the reconsideration form, and that goes up to us for our process.
As a school librarian, the school board has a very defined process. And so often when a parent would come to me, I could present how the book was chosen, what our goal was, and what our values were, and they would withdraw that. And once or twice in my 25 years, I had a parent go all the way to the school board, and they supported our process.
Thank you. And we appreciate the support of the board too, when they reconsidered and revised the collection development policy. So we want to thank the board, many of the GSO committees here for that. So we appreciate that support too. And I do want to shout out to Judy Poyer, our collection development manager. She is, in my 22 years of service, the best collection manager I've ever worked with.
I do have a question, Lisa. Forgive me, but it's in my habit, and I train and teach my children this, the habit of devil's advocacy. So
Sure.
forgive me, I'm going to go in the other direction for a moment. I abhor censorship in any form. I think any attempt to submerge or remove the First Amendment is, as I say, abhorrent. I got the impression from your presentation that you don't have particularly pleasant feelings toward the group of people that you cite as against books or for banning and the like. How do we, as opposed to lionizing or demonizing our opponent, find ways to begin or re-begin the dialogues you suggested used to take place, as opposed to what seems like scathing indictments of the other side?
Yeah, this is a great question because I would love some more civil discourse. I would love for people to come to the library and ask a question instead of creating social media posts when they only have a piece of information, when they've been baited with a picture from a book and told that that book appears in elementary school libraries when it does not. Trying to get those folks to have a civil conversation is kind of difficult. I will say it's not successful to try to argue online. And even when you try to make all of your points clear that you're not attacking anyone, that you just want to ask questions, the people who have been wound up often will take it to the next level and then result in threats. There are a number of people who have come into libraries to ask questions because they've seen things online, and those conversations go very well. I mean, we used to, back in the day, a lot of opposition to Harry Potter, right? People would, because Harry Potter had what in it? Witchcraft, absolutely. And those people would come in and we could have a conversation with them, and they mostly understood, like, oh, we're here to represent everybody. We've been, the argument has become so politically charged that it is difficult to get people to think about this or to be in the frame of mind to listen, to reason about it. Now, I get, there are folks that are concerned about what their children are exposed to, and we want those people to be talking to us and engaged and involved in the discussion, right? We want to explain to them how important it is that we take everyone in the community seriously and their needs. But we are just not in a position to be bullied to pull things off the shelves or hide books that have, like, for example, Bathe the Cat, to hide a book like that because someone disagrees with a gay lifestyle. I don't know if I'm quite answering your question because it does get very difficult. I've also been on the receiving end of a lot of screaming and online attacks because of my defense of the First Amendment and trying to explain it from a First Amendment point of view. Not a lot of people understand it enough to have a nuanced conversation. And so I think it's up to us to be patient and kind with those folks and understand that there might just be some more teaching involved. I'll be honest, one of the things that I use to educate people is, do you remember when suddenly Pluto wasn't a planet anymore?
Yeah.
Right. So that happened, and librarians all across the country at every age level had to pull all of the planet books that referenced Pluto and then purchase new books that didn't refer to Pluto, but they had to know which books existed at all these different grade levels. If you're a K, there was a school librarian, right? If you're a K-5 librarian, you've got to find kindergarten, third grade, and fifth grade level for Whole New Planet books with not an expanded budget. So how do we make those decisions for the best abilities for our communities? And when I bring it to that level and say, you know, the librarians needed to know what was available to purchase to make sure they were making the right decision, that opens the conversation to other topics that might not be as heated.
I appreciate your perspective, and it's the right answer, you know, certainly the one I see for the most part. What I'm kind of hoping to begin a dialogue at is, how do we head things off at the pass before, to use your term, people get riled up or whatever it is, where they get emotionally stoked by whatever it is they read or see? How do we sort of get information out in advance of that? I mean, is there something where we as, you know, people who love the library get releases ready, you know, in advance of a book coming? I mean, how did you do it, or is it something you've done before where you say, you know, I think this is going to create a firestorm, how do we get out in front of it?
I love this question because it's got a few answers, and one of them is everything you do good in your library, promote the heck out of it now, because you do so many things that are meant to capture so many people that a lot of folks don't always know what you're doing. The more you can promote the good stuff, the less likely the quote bad things are to have any effect, because people across your community will see the library is a net good. Even if I disagree with some of the things that are in there, it's a net positive. So if there is a book that's coming out that is, I'm going to guess, you know, young adult, and there's a lot of buzz around it and there's some concern about it, I think that your library board, your library director should be talking about, how do we manage this if people are going to be coming in and asking for this book and wondering where it's going to be shelved? Just preparing your staff for that.
Thank you. It does. It's very helpful.
Because I will say, I've done presentations like this all over the state and parts of the country. And when I say things like, City of Virginia Beach circulates surfboards in their library, people are... right? This stops you in your tracks. What? Surfboards? Yes, because the library recognizes that the cost of recreation is prohibitive to a lot of families. A surfboard is expensive. Renting one is expensive. Here's when you can come and try it at the library for free. All different sizes, different age groups. We also circulate pickleball equipment. So if you think you want to get involved in that, giant Jenga sets for graduation parties, people can reserve. So when we promote things like that and we start showing them all of the other things that we do, and that's top of mind, when they hear that there is a book in the library that has a rainbow flag in it, they might not be as quick to jump in and get angry. We also circulate cake pans. That gets everyone very excited.
That's a good one.
You know, if you need to make a shape of a 4 for your kid's birthday, those things are costing like $40 and $50 these days. Check it out at the library. They're in one library, they were interfiled in the baking section. Just pro tip, Skip.
Linda, I have a question. My name is Laura Ellis, and I, like Jan, a public school librarian. And one of the things that we did, to me, there's a separation between citizens coming to the library or the schools and having a concern. And it's a totally different scenario when you have the leader of the country make attacks that are unsubstantiated.
Correct.
So that's a different scenario. And what we did as teachers yesterday, we had a walk-in. So we had about 40 teachers, 30 teachers at my school. I was one of them, proud and loud, just supporting our students, supporting our communities. My school is 60% Hispanic. We have a very large special ed department. We have wheelchairs. We have everything. So the potential cuts and the policies that are going on could potentially greatly change my school. Absolutely. So are we considering as public libraries to do something not like that? Because our walk-in was a show of support, a show of we're going to support our teachers, we're going to support our students, and historically, well, in Montgomery County where I work, we have a huge shortage of special ed paras, para educators, because, that's just a very, very hard job, and it's not a job that's rewarded financially. So we're trying to change that in Montgomery County and make sure that our students who are the most vulnerable get the support they need. And we want to make sure that happens not just in Montgomery County, but every school in the country. So when we stand together as teachers, and we did it all yesterday, all over the country, to show that our love and support for our communities. And I don't know if librarians, public librarians and public museums would do something like that. Would it be effective? Because at NEA, we're a little more, radical, a little more loud. I'm a teacher. I have to, get, 30, 40 kids. Well, library, 75 to 150 kids, sometimes by myself. So we're kind of loud as public school educators. So is something like that, would that be helpful for libraries as well?
Yeah, this is a great question. We have had a lot of people ask, like, is there going to be a rally for libraries? Is there a way to do a protest? I think anyone can do a rally anytime they want. I think what's really powerful is like a banned books read-in, where you just have people come with their little soccer chairs and just sit quietly and read. And honestly, it's a great picture for the media. So Spotsylvania County, Virginia had that happen. They were having some real heated school board meetings, and someone coordinated a read-in. It could be something as simple as that, because it is so hard for library staff, I think, to even think about coordinating. And it crosses a line between a 501c3 and advocating and everything. But if your friends or foundation could do something like that with approval of the director, I think that would show how much people care about their libraries.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I thought the yo would have been for the dog. I didn't know it was for me. I'm watching you.
I think Linda's not on mute anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I know you only have 7 minutes left. I don't want to.
Anybody have any questions?
Yes, Lisa, thank you for the presentation and a lot of, well, you've added to the list of things I'm really ticked off about. But I'm also grateful that.
It's already a lengthy list.
Yeah. I feel it's like a CBS receipt.
I hear you.
But I am also appreciative of people like yourself and others who are giving us the information and tools and to fight back. I'm curious though, like we seem to be in an environment now where perhaps we need to worry less about the Moms for Liberty and the occasional county councilman, and perhaps even the executive branch of our federal government with some of this. It seems implausible we would ever be in a situation where we could imagine our president wanting to ban books at our local library. That doesn't seem so far-fetched right now. So I'm wondering if we're entering kind of a new period where we need to think through some of these strategies. If it's just, I don't even know what my question is other than like, what do we do about that? And is there, how do we fight back against that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think it's, I wish I knew the answer, right? Like we could have this all tied up by tomorrow if I had the answer. There are just some people that seem to be, their core values are different than ours, right? And trying to explain compassion to people is really difficult. I think as long as we can find our supporters and our partners, like if you were to look at the Unite Against Book Bans website and go to the partner list, it is fascinating how many people have joined us in this fight. And I'm not talking just about publishers who are worried about their bottom line, but all of these associations, all of these groups that really value education and see the libraries for the cornerstones they are, for the founding fathers' work that was put in. I know that sometimes you see these groups that get pitted against one another, and I'm a military widow. And so like veterans groups, it seems, tend to be veering toward a side that I can't identify with. But Vet Voice Foundation is my home. If any of you, like my home for advocacy from the veteran side of things. And we reached out to them when we were really deep in some things here, and they wrote a letter to our 8 school boards and 6 public library boards about the importance of the First Amendment. And I'd like to think it made a difference coming from that group.
Lisa,
Yes.
perhaps we have a need for, coming from the intellectual freedom groups, some kind of toolkit that gives us all the ideas anybody's come up with or used, so
Right.
that when we have to fight back, we have a lot of things that we could try.
Yes, and I think there are some things on Unite Against Book Bans about that. I would like, there are some things that have worked and some things that haven't. Like my invoice stunt worked because I had seen this pattern of like, I'm a taxpayer, and it was the right time to do it because of the way that the people who were filing to run for office, like I wouldn't recommend that at your first board meeting, right? Like you want to do your research about it. There have been letter writing campaigns, postcard campaigns. I will tell you, one of the things that I recommend people do when they feel helpless is find a library that has been specifically under attack and send them a card in the mail to say you're sorry and that you support them. Samuel's Public Library in Front Royal has converted their entire break room wall into a wall of thanks, and they've gotten letters from all over the world, so that when they need a moment, they go in there and they get rejuvenated by the thank you wall. It's small, it's simple, it doesn't move a federal needle. But like, how long has it been since you got a card in the mail? Like, makes you feel kind of good, right? Like all the junk mail and the Valpaks and the bills. Getting actual mail. And we're supposed to be supporting the post office too, right? I got my whole sheet of John Lewis stamps here.
So Lisa suggested that to me the other day, and I sent a card to Samuel's Library, so I guess my card is on their wall. Lisa, you're in a new position as of, I guess, April 21st or something like that. Congratulations on that. You kind of opened this with the IMLS statement that this newly sworn in acting director, I just called it up. To me, this is kind of a chilling statement. If this is the new focus of our primary agency at the federal level, here's what they say. He says, we will revitalize IMLS and restore focus on patriotism, ensuring that we preserve our country's core values, promote American exceptionalism, and cultivate love of country in future generations. This is, to me, a very narrow, kind of right-wing way of looking at the purpose, the mission of an organization that supports libraries, which are all about the vast world of knowledge that we sort of bring to people, and I don't know, I guess it's almost a statement, an anti-diversity statement.
Yes.
In some ways. I mean, we have promoted diversity, we've promoted inclusiveness, we've promoted recognizing everybody in this country of 330 million people, all of whom are individually different. And so I just find that as a chilling statement. So as you go on in this next year, in this new role that you have, I know you'll be all over the country, you'll be leading our public advocacy efforts within ALA. I wish you well. I think you're just the right person to be doing this. So
thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Skip. And I'm going to throw this out for you. Just a little factoid about this gentleman who put out that statement. Grandchild of Holocaust survivors.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Thank you.
It sounds just like Hitler. We're going to promote patriotism. We're going to tell on our family if they don't go along with what Hitler says.
Yeah.
And
so when I first worked as a reference librarian in Charlotte, North Carolina, the person who had been the head of the main library there from like 1938 up through the late 70s when I started there, in the early 50s, they were requiring people to sign loyalty statements because it was the McCarthy era.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we're back in that kind of a time frame. So we haven't gotten there yet, but who knows what we'll see in the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, like, my hope is that, like was mentioned, and who knows if that'll change, those attorneys general thinking about saying, like, this is going far beyond the statutory requirements. That's just one sliver of it. Like, I hope that it would be adjudicated in court and we could get our millions of dollars that comes to the library so that we can keep our state library open and have all of that trickle down. But some of these fundamental principles are really staggering. The removal of information from people from the Arlington National Cemetery website. Like, oh, and I should mention, there is a group of people, the Data Rescue Project, that have been downloading websites for quite a number of months in anticipation of this and are retaining the information. So if you want to visit their website, Data Rescue Project, I think is the official name of it. So like, there are heroes out there doing the work. And I think we're all hoping that we'll get back to this. Right, to where we don't have to worry about whether or not a post that we make or a phone call we make could be something that gets us, Scarlet 8 or something. I don't know. But I don't want to end this on a bleak note. Like, I really do want to say we are smarter and stronger than the people who are fighting this battle against us. And we're going to win. It's just going to take some time. And it's supporters like you that are giving your time to library boards and folks who are visiting museums. Like, we are the majority. We need to keep doing it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Lisa, and all of you who participated in the conversation.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting your meeting run long so I could talk to you all. Have a wonderful day. I'm going to go ahead and sign off.
Thank
See you
you.
later, Skip.
I want to add a note in favor of, or in the interest of civility. I really appreciate what Rudy told us earlier in the meeting, that instead of relying on electronic communications, having the person come in makes all the difference in the world. I think about the difference between the kinds of material I get online and what happens when the very same person comes in and politely represents themselves and allows for a real conversation to take place. I think it's exactly the right thing, and it ought to cut out a substantial majority of the nonsense that goes on. So, yeah, thank you for that. But we have completed our agenda, and I should call the meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
I've given up on work. Okay.
I love that.